We have a quorum. So I call to order this meeting, which is a Bills Committee on Rural Representative Election Legislation Amendment Bill 2013. So we proceed with the election of chairman for the bill I mentioned. Rural Representative Election Legislation Amendment Bill 2013. The relevant procedures for the election of chairman are provided in Appendix 4 to the House Rules, that is House Rule 21(e). So nominations, please. Mr. Chang Ham Pen, I nominate Mr. Yip Kwok Him. Do you agree? Do you accept? Yes. Any seconder? Ms. Alex Mack. Seconds. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? If not, I declare that Mr. Yip Kwok Him is returned Chairman of the Rural Representative Election Legislation Amendment Bill 2013. Thank you. Thank you for your support. I'll invite the administration in. As we all know, this bill in fact the village representative elections are under the way, and this bill will be introduced so that in relation to representatives other than village representatives in non-traditional villages or non-indigenous villages, for example, Cheung Chau and other rural areas, this bill applies to those elections. So, may I welcome from the administration Mr. Patrick Lee, Deputy Director of Home Affairs, and Ms. Leona Law, Assistant Director of Home Affairs, and Mr. Market Chi, Principal Liaison Officer, Home Affairs Department, and Mr. Gilbert Moe, Deputy Law Draftsman from the Department of Justice, and also Ms. Emma Wong, Senior Government Counsel. Welcome. So, perhaps I will invite Deputy Director to walk us through the bill before we begin our discussion. Deputy Director, please. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. The Rural Representative Election Legislation Amendment Bill 2013 seeks to amend 3 areas. The first area is in relation to the Kaifong representative elections in Cheung Chau and Peng Chau, and also on accounting arrangements after elections, and for and also to impose a maximum amount of election expenses for election with over 5,000 electors. Now, village representative election has been conducted in accordance with the Village Representative Election Ordinance (VREO) since its enactment in 2003, and in Cheung Chau RC and Peng Chau RC there are respectively 39 and 17 representatives, and their functions and roles are similar to the village representatives. So we propose to apply the relevant legislation to KFR election in Cheung Chau and Peng Chau, and they include rural they include Electoral Affairs Commission's Office, EICIO, and other legislation. And afterwards, all the complaints, objections, petitions will be looked into by an independent body rather than the Home Affairs Department or the district office. And any breaches of the relevant legislation will be dealt with in accordance with the EICIO, and we propose to rename the VREO as Rural Representative Election Ordinance, and rural representative shall include village representative and Kaifang representative, and Cheung Chau and Peng Chau Kaifang representative will also be included. In relation to counting arrangements, voting procedures, and maximum amount of election expenses, they will be stipulated in the law. And in relation to voting and counting arrangements, currently votes in VR election are counted manually. Because of the relatively larger number of electors and candidates in Kaifang representative election, we propose to introduce computer counting and also to introduce roundtable counting as an alternative fallback counting method. As for the counting arrangements for VR and KFR elections, we propose to align them with those for LegCo and DC elections. That is, if the number of electors chosen on a ballot paper exceeds the candidates needed in an election, they will be considered invalid. The third area is about the maximum amount of election expense to be incurred by each candidate. For 1,000 or fewer electors for each candidate, the maximum amount of election expenses is 18,000, and for over 1,000 electors, 28,000. In view of the large number of electors in case KFR election, we propose that for over 5,000 electors, the maximum amount of election expense that can be incurred can be set at 38,000. As in the last election in Cheung Chau, there were 8,600 electors and 3,100 electors in Peng Chau, respectively. And we have reached a consensus after careful consideration, and the proposal was discussed by the HA panel in July this year with the members' support. And we also consulted the district Cheung Chau and Peng Chau District Council and Cheung Chau and Peng Chau Rural Council in Heung Yee Kuk. And we welcome questions from members. After the bill is passed, we expect to start voters registration for the KFR election in 2015. Thank you, Deputy Director. We will follow the usual practice. I will open the floor to general discussion on matters of members' concern. And after we expressed our concerns fully, we will move on to clause-by-clause scrutiny. Deputy Director just now explained that, in fact, for KFR representative election or village representative election, it will be changed to rural representative election, and Cheung Chau and Peng Chau rural committees will be included, and some amendments will be made to the counting arrangements. Because of the larger number of candidates and electors, computer counting will be introduced, and also something to do with maximum amount of election expenses. These are the areas covered. But at the Bills Committee, we can also consider other matters of members' concern. Perhaps the administration may not have noted these issues, but we can also, our discussion can also touch upon these issues. Public hearing can also be arranged to seek their views on the bill. It can be arranged in due course. We can discuss when later. Any views? No? So, on public hearing, any views from members? The Secretariat already made some arrangements. 6th, 15th of January, these are available slots. Also, 27th of December, but it might be too soon. So these are the available time slots, the 27th of December and 6th and 15th of January. 15th of January, that's the CE's policy address. There'll be a clash. So let's strike this out. So that's maybe the 6th of January will be more appropriate. Can it be in the afternoon? But we don't have a venue in the afternoon, not the conference room. What about 10:45 in the morning? The room is available. In the afternoon, no conference room is available. How about earlier? On the 6th of January, you'll be clashing with the FA panel. How about earlier, 9:30? Perhaps we will make further arrangements. You'd like to have the meeting earlier? Well, I don't want to clash with FAP, but I know it's difficult to accommodate all. We'll try our best. Tentatively, we schedule for the 6th of January, perhaps earlier at 9 or so. We'll check the venue as well. 9:30 is also okay. All right, so be it. That's the tentative arrangement. So, we move on to the general discussion on the bill. Members can raise their concerns. Mr. Albert Hall. As set out in the electoral brief, this provides a statutory basis for the Cheung Chau and Ping Chau election. That's what I want to point out. At present, it's not statute-based. There's no legal basis. As we understand, for Kaifeng representative elections, it's different from VR election. Of course, it's a 3-tier. Of course, there is also the Hung Kok, but in Cheung Chau, it's just a 2-tier structure. We only have Kaifeng representatives. So Cheung Chau residents have been complaining that it's in fact against the law, but I understand that the case was not taken to court, and the Secretary for Home Affairs back then promised to enact a piece of legislation. That's my understanding. But the complaint isn't just about the lack of a legal basis. This form of election is different from the other elections in the new territories. You have resident representatives and village representatives in the new territories, but in Cheung Chau there are only 39 seats. The whole Cheung Chau is one constituency, and the same applies to Ping Chau. So if it's actually a village representative election, in fact, you should set up constituencies according to villages and carry out the election just like other VR elections do.
Because in our law, KFR is not equivalent to VR. So why do we have a KFR election now? And now one person can vote for 39 candidates. And how can one person know 39 candidates? Even though it's not divided into 39 villages, maybe Changchao can be divided into several areas, and each area, well, and then totally there will be 5 or 6 candidates. Would that be better? But please answer my first question first. Why is the whole of Changchao regarded as one whole district? And when a place has become a town, then it's no longer a village. And now you have invented this Sky form representative. And in other areas of Hong Kong, this does not exist. Why do you still want to keep it? I would like to thank Mr. Ho for his question. Well, please allow me to tell you some history. Now, for rural representative election, including village representative election and KFR election, actually in 1898, we already had indigenous inhabitants villages, and afterwards we have villages, and then we have a village representatives election. As for Changchao and Pingchao in 1898, they existed as market towns. So Kaifeng representatives were elected to represent the views of people living in the market towns. So at that time there was a 3-tier system, but it's not a village, it's a market town, and administratively KFR were elected, and they were also members of the Changchao and Pingchao rural committees. So this was the arrangement before this legislation. Now why do we want to introduce statutory regulation of KCR election? Because we have been trying to improve rural elections. And in 2003, we legislated for the election of village representatives. And now after 3 terms, we have accumulated some experience. So we are trying to make improvement to other rural representative elections. So for Pingchao and Changchao KFR election, we think now is the right time to legislate on it. And there are several advantages, because if there are any claims or petitions, if they are handled by the district officer, is not fair. And after legislation, there will be an independent mechanism taking care of this. So it's just like village representative election. The EAC or a court can take care of the complaints and petitions. And for the village representative register, we can ask the immigration department or the housing department to provide us with information so that we can check the register. However, for KFR election, because it's done administratively, so we do not have the authority to ask the relevant government departments to provide us with the information. So that's why we have to legislate. Just now we talked about 39 votes. Well, all along, including village representative election, well, actually, rural committees have had a long history, and for Changchao Rural Committee, it has existed since 1961, and for Pingchao since 1959. At Changchao, at that time, each person can cast at most 39 votes. At Pingchao, 17 votes. So we want to respect the historical arrangements. So when we legislate this time, we hope to keep this system. That is, each elector is allowed to cast 39 and 17 votes. Well, can you tell me, are there any other KFR elections in the other parts of Hong Kong? I think there are many market towns in the new territories, and they used to have KFR elections. So how come those elections are all gone and KFR election now only exists in Changchao and Pingchao? Well, you talk about history, but a lot of habits and customs in the new territories have already changed, and why do you not want to change this custom in Changchao and Pingchao? Now, if people think that this representative are elected to help us, and then I'm not going to argue with you. But how come only these two places are still keeping this custom of KFR election? How come it cannot be aligned with other villages? And if it cannot be done, why don't you divide Pingchao and Changchao into different villages? Well, just now I talked about market towns, and they already existed in 1898. Well, there are many other market towns like this in Hong Kong. And at that time, they already had KFR election, and we only had Pingchao and Changchao doing that. But we still have any other market towns, for example, Shek-Wu-Hui. Well, you say that they have a long history, but that's because you have agreed that they continue to do that. Now you have district councils. Well, why is it so unique? Why only Pingchao and Changchao can enjoy this special arrangement? Well, because in other places, the government has already stopped this kind of practice. On Pingchao and Changchao, do they have villages? On Pingchao and Changchao, in 1898, they did not have any village. And in 1991, they did not have any village either. In 1898, they had market towns. So for market towns, they were places where commercial and industrial activities were carried out. So they always only had market towns. But there are villages on Changchao. So how come there are no village representatives? Why do you want the market towns to represent the villages? I have checked the map, but there are several villages on Changchao. There may not be a lot of people living there. Maybe there are just 20 houses there, but still there are villages on Changchao. Well, for village representative election ordinance, it's very clear. It's about existing villages and indigenous inhabitants villages, as well as composite election villages. So the definitions are very clear. But these villages do not exist on Changchao and Pingchao. And when we look at history, I mentioned the year 1898. At that time, on Changchao and Pingchao, they only had market towns. Yes, they can call themselves villages. It doesn't matter. But in the law, they are not defined as villages. You have to make this clear. Now, we are talking about election law. And if it's an existing village, an indigenous village or composite indigenous village, it will be covered by the village representative election ordinance. But on Pingchao and Changchao, they do not have villages. Well, I think this was man-made in 2003. Well, those villages exist, and you should allow them to vote. I think the villages can give us a lot of opinions in this regard. Now, for the VREO, I was also the chairman of the relevant bills committee. I remember we also talked about this. And because Changchao and Pingchao did not have any natural villages, and those villages have not been registered, so they only had market towns. And I think at Qingyi, there was a similar problem. We have argued for quite some time when we scrutinized the VREO. So, Deputy Director, Mr. Ho has asked some questions. Maybe you should give us a more detailed explanation. That is why the VREO cannot be applied to Changchao and Pingchao. And on Changchao and Pingchao, now they only elect Kaifeng representatives. Please give us more detailed explanation next time. As for village representatives election and Kaifeng representative election, we always have to trace the sources. Why? Well, there were market towns and villages in the past, so we have to trace that history. But now you are changing the title to rural representative election. Mr. Chen Kalok. Thank you, Chairman. I think the government needs to give us more background information. Now, the government official says that he always have to trace the origin. Then when was the origin? Well, at least in 2003, these two places were not included in the VLCO. I think some members here have taken part in the scrutiny of that bill, but you should tell us more why these two islands were not included in the VLEO. Was it a matter of definition or what? So please give us more background information. And we will be conducting a public hearing, so residents of Pingchao and Changchao will be coming here and they will be giving us more information as well. As for the election method, because the government does not want to make a major change, so now a villager is allowed to cast 39 votes. So should we have more discussion in this regard? So now you think you are making a lot of changes already. You do not want to change the election method. So are some people objecting to a change in the election method? Well, this is also important when we scrutinize the bill. And also, I would like to ask the third question. For the maximum amount of election expenses, now you have set three levels, 18,000, 28,000, and 38,000. So if the elector number is less than 1,000, more than 1,000, 28,000, and more than 5,000, 38,000. So there must be some justifications. Have you made a reference to the expenses in the past elections? How did you set these three lines? That is, for less than 1,000 electors, $18,000, more than 1,000 electors, $28,000, etc. So when it's compared to the past, are you raising the maximum amount or are you lowering the maximum amount? Deputy Director, thank you. I would like to answer the last two questions first. Well, we just now mentioned that on Changchao, a person can cast 39 votes. We have talked to the Changchao people, and we asked them, what if we change it? Well, they insist that they want the original arrangement. That is, one person can cast 39 votes. So we have taken their views. Because now we are organizing rural elections, so we want to respect the rural customs. So we suggest that Pingchao and Changchao maintain the status quo, that is, one person can cast 39 votes and 17 votes respectively. As for the figure of $38,000, we have made a reference to some past elections. At the last village election, well, Shanshuihang had the most electors. They had about 2,000 electors, and at that time, the election expenses was on the average $7,000 and is $3.5 per villager. And for Pingchao, they had 8,600 electors. So if it's $38,000, then each elector would be $4.4 on the average. And for background information, yes, we can provide you with more information later. Well, in 2003, we had the first VR representative. So we legislated for the existing villages, indigenous villages, and composite indigenous villages at that time. So apart from existing villages and indigenous villages, we also have representatives for Kaifengs. So after these elections, we think it's time to enhance the arrangements for these
elections for representatives, and that is why we'd like to enhance the legal basis for KFR election. Chairman, I welcome the administration to provide us with supplementary information. Why was it that in 2003 these two were not included? Please give us some information on the amount of election expenses. Perhaps I didn't make it clear. I meant to say the comparisons should be drawn on the basis of the past elections in Changchao and Pingchao. With the amendment and with the new arrangements, I'd like to know the impact in relation to the amount of election expenses on these elections in Changchao and Pingchao. And in the past, one person could have 39 votes. So you should have the relevant records. What about the turnover rate? What about the number of candidates running for an election? Because in the past, we have had 3 KFR elections, and that we found that the turnover rates were not very high. A winning candidate might only secure just several dozen votes in order to win. So please give us some statistics to facilitate our discussion, Deputy Director. Thank you for your question. In the last Changchao and Pingchao KFR elections, they were carried out by administrative means. We did not have any statistics in this regard, therefore. In the last Kaifeng representative election, the turnover rate for Changchao was 29%, for Pingchao 50.9%. Comparing to village representative elections, which are legally based, for Changchao is relatively lower, for Pingchao is relatively higher. We hope that through civic education and publicity, we can increase the turnover rate or the turnout rate. Who else would like to speak? Mr. Yu Siwing. I'd like to know whether the interests of electors or candidates might be affected. In the past, 39 votes, that's a form of administrative election. Yes, but it's not statute-based. So what about the election in Lama Island? Any difference, Deputy Director? On Lama Island, as mentioned just now, there was a village in 1898. So the existing VREO applies. At that time, only Changchao and Pingchao were left because they no longer had any such villages. So that piece of legislation didn't cover these two. So that is to say, for this bill, finally, we're going to incorporate these two places, and we call them rural areas, so that you can have rural representative elections in the same manner as VR elections, so that in the future you won't have any outlying islands experiencing the same problem. According to history, they're called market towns. So we don't need, in future, another piece of legislation to conduct KFR election in market towns, Mr. Abbott-Ho. In 1898, there were a lot of market towns, not only Changchao and Pingchao. In 2003, when the legislation was enacted, was it the case that only market towns in Changchao and Pingchao were left? As I remember, there were no more market towns because they already have village representatives. And back then, there was much discussion on it, and representatives in the new territories also expressed their views on why these market towns cannot be changed into villages. Over to you, Deputy Director. Absolutely correct. In 2003, only Changchao and Pingchao were left as market towns. And we legislate in a gradual and orderly manner, and that is why we dealt with village representative elections first, and this is the second phase where we incorporate KFR elections so that these elections can be statute-based. There must be some reasons why these were not included back then, because they were different, right? And now they are incorporated in this bill. Yes, this is rural representative, but in fact I can see towards the end they are still regarded as village representatives. Is that right? KFR and VR, can you tell me what's their relationship? Thank you, Mr. Ho, for your question. In the past, before we legislate for KFR elections, there are two forms of VRs. One is resident representatives, the other is indigenous inhabitant representatives. Now, for this KFR representative, well, actually, they are representatives of the community, and they share similar functions and roles as village representatives. They reflect the views to the rural committees on behalf of the residents in the community. They bear different names, but they share similar functions. For Changchao, Pingchao, the place is called market towns, and the village and the representatives is Kaifeng representatives. Whereas for villages, the representatives are called village representatives (VR), but they share the similar functions in the sense that they reflect the views of villages to the rural committee. So, is it the case that for Changchao, the whole of Changchao is regarded as an indigenous village, and inhabitants can therefore have burial rights as well as rights to build small houses? Our understanding is that their rights are different from indigenous villages. For Changchao, after fulfilling the 10-year residence requirement, you can have burial rights. So it's very different. For those under Heng Yi Kok, all are indigenous villages. And actually, no. There are three types of villages. One is called indigenous villages, the other is existing villages. Indigenous villages means those existed before 1898. Existing village. When in 1991 we compiled a register with Heng Yi Kok on the villages in new territories. At the time, those registered would be regarded as existing villages, and there are also market towns like in Changchao and Pingchao, and these Kaifeng representatives are there to reflect the views of residents to the rural committee. That is why the legal basis, this form is applied to KFR election. Mr. Mo, would you like to supplement as well on the point of drafting? I think Deputy Director's elucidation is very accurate in reflecting the present situation. So, after enacting the bill, does it mean that Kaifeng representatives is equal to village representatives? Well, that's not the most important point anyway. The second part of my question is more important. On electoral method, I think it's not modernized, it's unfair because one person or one elector can cast 39 votes. I think the administration should discuss with the two market towns on a more or better arrangement, because these two market towns are not small. In Pingchao, 1 seat, And for district council seats, for one district council constituents seat, there are different constituencies in the district. So I think we should have different constituencies. In terms of the number of seats, they won't be reduced. It will remain at 39, but there should be different constituencies, because they can canvass votes in a group. We call it block votes. Newcomers can't join. New residents would like to express their views as well. I think it's all right if 3 or 4 of them can be elected as representatives. So I'd like to make my point. It's not fair, this 39 votes arrangement. And then I think there should be at least 5 or 6 constituencies, so that each can only vote, say, for 5 or 6 candidates. For example, if there are 5 or 6 seats in that constituency, then each elector can only vote, have 3 votes, just as an example, so that new residents can also become representatives. It's out of goodwill. I really hope that residents, other than, newer residents, might also have a sense of belonging to the community. They might also be a member of the Green Group, and they would like to contribute as well. But under the existing system, there is no way they will be elected as representatives. Say, if there are over 40 candidates, then you may not know them all. So my view is quite supported by the younger generation in Cheungchao. That's quite a substantial number of them. Deputy Director, our legislative intent or our policy intent is to try our best to safeguard the traditions and customs. And the Cheungchao Rural Committee, on the idea of the delineation of constituencies, they would like to preserve the existing arrangements. We can further consult Cheungchao or Pingchao RC on this point. Yes, please do our best. Please do your best, because it's up to us, after the bill is tabled into LegCo, how or whether the bill can be passed. I think the administration should take the lead in the discussion. Dr. Kenneth Chen, I have a follow-up question. My concern is similar to Mr. Albert Ho's. You can say it's already a big step that this now comes under the legislative framework. I'd like to follow up on the amount of election expenses. This is about the election expenses for each candidate. So, following along the lines of Mr. Albert Ho's argument, say if a group of 39 people stand for an election together, then for each candidate they get a maximum amount of 38,000, so that altogether they can have a maximum of 1.4 million. So I think this is Mr. Albert Ho's concern. They can come as a team of 39, and they can do some outstanding work with 1.4 million election expenses. So let's put aside the traditional practice. We should consider whether it's open, impartial, and fair, because they can be allies, and they can have a maximum amount as a team of 1.4 million to fight against an independent candidate.
One person can cast 39 votes. Well, I have explained to you why the arrangement is like this, and we hope that these arrangements can be kept. Well, as to whether they would pool their $38,000 together, well, then I think it's the individual decisions of the candidates. But this is permitted in the law. So it is an expense incurred by the election. So can they join hands to electioneer, or can they? Well, they need to give you do they need to give you a breakdown of the expenses? Well, it's quite obvious that they can do this. Now you have taken reference from other electoral arrangements in Hong Kong. Now, several candidates can join hands, and their election expenses can be very high. The total amount can be big. Well, I understand that it's very difficult to argue with you about tradition, but when you come here, you would understand that legislators may have another perspective. That is whether we should consider a certain form of arrangement so that it can be fairer. Well, you insist that a person can cast 39 votes, but if there are 39 candidates joining hands, then they would have a total allowance of $1.4 million. Then how can an independent candidate compete with them? I'm sure that in the course of scrutiny, these questions will pop up again. So can you try to clarify this? Can they pool their money so that they can jointly electioneer? And can they claim their expenses en masse? Well, according to District Council election experience, I discovered that some candidates would join hands. But now these people may be doing the same thing, so we want to clarify this point. So this is not a list system, right? So they are individual candidates. They are not on the same list. So I hope that this can be clarified. Can you give us a response right now? Well, for each candidate, he would have to adhere to his maximum amount of election expenses, and he has to show us his bills. So it's his election, it's not their election. So as to whether some of them will join hands and pool their resources together, and then the election expenses become $1.4 million, then I will have to look into it, and then I will give you a more detailed answer later. Mr. Yu Si-wing. Well, for this rural representative election, I think this is to keep the tradition of the rural committee elections. So we do not want too many changes. So I do not want to see a huge change in one go, because this is just a minor adjustment. I think you have already discussed the arrangements in great details before coming here. And I remember in some other elections, the candidates can join hands, but they have to give a breakdown of their expenses. So each, for example, if 10 persons totally, they use $10,000 on pamphlets, then each candidate would have to show a bill stating that he has spent $1,000 on the pamphlet. So I think you have to clarify this with the rural election candidates because they may have not done this before. An invoice will be regarded as an official document, and other documents or other receipts may not be the same. So you have to tell them all the details. Well, for rural elections, we'll have to look at their traditions, and we have to make improvements in a gradual and orderly manner, and we have to discuss with the rural committees, we have to discuss with the residents. So now we have already made improvements by doing this, because originally it was done administratively. Now it will have a statute basis. So the election expenses will be looked at individually. So we will not calculate in the form of a group. Well, in the past, there were this kind of elections already. So it has already been operating. Now, you may not be able to give us an answer confidently right now, but please give us a paper on the past practice. Now, has this happened before? That is the unfair arrangements mentioned by Mr. Chen Ka-lok, because the candidates can put together their resources, and then together they can enjoy a maximum amount of more than $1 million. Yes, we will try to collect all information and give members a clearer answer. And now you are saying that for counting votes in the future, it will become computer counting. So for district council elections, electrical elections, other than functional constituency, we did not use computer counting. We only used manual counting, and it's also the same for district councils. So do you have confidence in doing this? 5,000 people are casting their votes. So do you really think that you can use computer counting? According to my experience, it's actually quite a painful task. Well, for the election committee, there were only 4,000 odd votes, and when one mistake was made, I think you have to spend 5 or 6 hours to rectify it. So do you think you would repeat this same mistake? Otherwise, you may have to spend 1 or 2 days counting the votes. Have you thought about these technical issues? So I don't understand why for area or district elections like this we need to use computer counting, because we want to provide flexibility. Well, for rural representative election, we hope that we can use both manual counting and computer counting. So it is just another option. Now, we understand that computer systems are being upgraded all the time. Well, at the moment it may not be ideal, but in the long run this may be a better option. So we want to maintain the flexibility in the law, because we have looked at other elections. For example, election committee subsector elections, they use computer counting. It may not be ideal right now, but now we want to make use of this opportunity of legislation so that we can provide one more option. We just want more flexibility. Now, if computer counting is not the most ideal option, then we may not use it, but the law will just allow for more flexibility if we include it. So you will consider both manual and computer countings, right? So the government or the EAC can decide. So if just a small election covering several hundred people, maybe you can do it, etc. Yes, there's a flexibility. Okay, members, do you want to ask any questions or microscopic questions concerning the bill? If not, I think the governments may know our concerns right now, and we have fixed a date for public hearing. And we will be holding another meeting. So do you want the meeting to be held after the public hearing, right? Then after the public hearing, we will resume our regular meetings. And then the government can give us answers concerning the questions we asked just now. Well, please give us some historical data. I myself have experienced it, but some other members may not have that experience. Maybe our research and library service department can also provide us with some background information. So I will not fix the date for the next meeting. We will wait till after the public hearing. If members agree to this arrangement, then let's move on to the next agenda item, that's AOB. No AOB? Then let's end the meeting here. As for the date of next meeting, that's the 6th of January 2014. And that's the public hearing, and we hope that we can start the meeting at 9:30.